Cats versus dogs, good versus evil, me versus Bart. These are some of the greatest rivalries of all time, but none of them hold a candle to the clash of titans that went down at Le Mans in the 1960s. From this meeting of giants came the greatest sports car the Ford Motor Company has ever produced. It's a motorsport legend that changed the way people perceived American cars around the world and put Ford at the top of the food chain. This is everything you need to know to get up to speed on the Ford GT. Our story begins in 1963, Italy. Henry Ford II was in talks with Enzo Ferrari to buy the Ferrari brand, and the deal was at the cusp of completion. Ford wanted to improve their image for performance because they didn't really have one. So instead of building a whole new car, Henry decided it would just be easier to buy up a struggling sports car brand from Europe. Luckily, at the time, Ferrari was a struggling car brand from Europe. But as Enzo was about to sign the contract selling his namesake to the Americans, he noticed a clause that he hadn't seen earlier. With the agreement, Ford would own the Ferrari. I was choking on my spit. With the agreement, Ford would own both the Ferrari road car division and the race team. Enzo did not like that. Ferrari stormed out of the room with his lawyer in tow, leaving the Ford guys scratching their little noggins. Back home in Dearborn, Henry Ford II gathered his most trusted associates and gave them an order. Build a car that will crush Ferrari. To do that, the Ford Motor Company turned to British racing boutique The Lola Company had competed in Le Mans before and used Ford small block V8s to do it. Knowing this, Ford offered to do a collab on their new race car, kind of like Nelly and Tim McGraw. Ford's first car based on the Lola, the GT40 Mark I, didn't do so hot when they first took it to France in 1964. All three cars they took broke down. Clearly, Ford had some work to do. The man Ford hired to right the sinking ship was none other than Texan chicken farmer and American hero, Carroll Shelby.
My name's Carroll Shelby, and performance is my business.
His Daytona coupe had won its class the same year all the Fords broke, so Henry figured that if there was anyone who could help beat Ferrari, it was him. Shelby and his team started tinkering with the GT40. They took the Mark I out to Willow Springs and measured air movement around the car. Shelby estimated the GT was losing 75 horsepower on airflow alone. So they went back to the shop and redesigned the inlets and outlets. They put some big old brakes on it so the car would stop faster for longer. Then Shelby did what Shelby did best. He turned the motor to make over 450 horsepowers. They took the GT to one of America's most hallowed endurance races. The 2,000 kilometers of Daytona. That's 1,242.74 miles for you freaking Yanks. No one knew how the Ford would do. Ferrari had won the previous year, and their car for the 1965 season was brand new. To beat Ferrari in Daytona would be a huge boost to morale. Kind of like pizza day here at Donut.
Is pizza?
No.
Oh.
Luckily for Shelby's team, the Ferrari blew a tire, letting the GT gain a huge lead and take the win. Not so luckily, the victory at Daytona would be the only win for the entire season. Even worse, Ferrari won at Le Mans that year. Again! Ferrari! In 1966, Henry Ford II is getting a little antsy in his little pantsies. They put so much time and money into these cars, but have nothing to show for it. Enzo Ferrari is chilling back at Maranello, laughing to himself every night before he goes to sleep. Not this year, Henry thought to himself. They had to win. Shelby redesigned the GT again, this time with a Goliath 7-liter V8. The 427 was good for 485 horsepower. It was the same engine Ford was using in NASCAR. It was American as But Shelby wouldn't be the only guys racing for Ford. Since Henry was getting a little impatient, he brought in Holman Moody, the guys in charge of Ford's NASCAR program. Henry figured having two teams would create some competition and better his chances of beating Ferrari. And guess what? He was right. The two Ford teams fought hard all season, and when they arrived at Le Mans, it was freaking on. Ford had to remind them, hey, you're here to beat Ferrari. Settle your differences on your own time. As the green flag dropped on race day, the GTs were off to a great start. And by 3 a.m. that morning, 3 of Shelby's cars were in the lead. And the Ferrari team had suffered serious damage on their most dominant cars. The hours and laps went by, with each becoming more tense than the last. Could Ford finally win? At 4 p.m., 2 Shelbys and 1 Holman Moody crossed the finish line at Le Mans in a triangle formation. Ford had beat Ferrari. I just almost started crying. The GT would win 3 more races at Le Mans, cementing it as one of the greatest sports cars of all time. It proved that Americans could win at the racetrack, not just at the ovals, but at the most hallowed ground in all of European motorsport. It was kind of a big deal. Ford continued the GT program with the GT70, except this GT wasn't meant for Le Mans. It was designed for the dusty back roads of the World Rally Circuit. Ford UK wanted to beat Lancia and Porsche in the rally game like they had done in NASCAR and at Le Mans. But unlike those efforts, the GT70 didn't really work out, and the project was scrapped in 1973. After that, Ford didn't really make any more sports cars. They made sporty cars like the Mustang and Escort, but nothing that captured that classic world-beating Le Mans fight flavor of the GT40. But in 1995, Ford unveiled a new concept called the GT90. Ford took the chassis from the Jaguar XJ220 supercar and put a quad-turbo V12 behind the driver. This insane power plant made the GT90 concept the fastest car in the world, with a top speed of 253 miles an hour. In 1995, Coolio was still on the Billboard Hot 100, and this thing was putting up Bugatti Veyron numbers. But sadly, the GT90 was just one-off concept car and never went into production. Ford fans would never see the GT name again. Until 2002. It had been nearly 60 years since Henry Ford II's deal with Ferrari fell through, and to commemorate Ford's crowning achievement, they introduced their GT40 concept car to the world at the Detroit Auto Show. And unlike the GT90 before it, this GT actually made it to production in 2004. The GT made 550 horsepower from a 5.4-liter supercharged V8. Some people think the engine is the same as the Ford Lightning's, but the GT's was all aluminum, had more valves, dual fuel injectors, a dry sump system, and piston skirt oil squirters. The GT40 was in production from 2004 to 2006, and in that short time, it reminded the world that Ford could make a stellar supercar. But it would be 10 more years until the GT returned to Le Mans. In January 2015, Mariah Carey was single again. Shia LaBeouf was in that Sia video, and most importantly, Ford shocked the world yet another time with the reveal of the 2016 Ford GT at the Detroit Auto Show. People lost their friggin' minds. It's the coolest car I have ever seen, and I saw the Wienermobile twice. The new GT is powered by a twin-turbo EcoBoost V6 this time around, making 647 horsepower. The car is almost entirely carbon fiber, weighing in at just over 3,000 pounds, only twice as much as my dad. Buttresses are sculpted into the sides of the body, reducing drag and guiding air to the rear wing. That wing deploys at high speeds to keep the tail in check, and flattens when you step on the brakes to slow the car down. If you want to take your GT to the track, you don't have to worry about installing a cage, because it already has a cage. This thing is a real race car for the road. I've driven one. I drove it before the Stig did.
You know, we have a lot in common because we're both professional drivers.
The race version of the GT differed from the street one in a few key ways. Front splitter, rear diffuser, a fixed wing, and exhaust outlets inside the taillights. Sick. It was no coincidence that Ford chose 2016 as the launch year of the GT. It would be the 50th anniversary since their victory over Ferrari at Le Mans, and Ford wanted to go back and win again. That would be pretty sweet, but other people like winning too. Ford rivals Chevy and Ferrari weren't going to let Old Blue take the win just because it was his anniversary. If Ford wanted the checkered flag, they were gonna have to work for it. The weight of the Ford's name was on this team's shoulders. Miraculously, 2 American GTs locked out the front row in qualifying, with Ferrari close behind in third. The stage was set for war! With heavy rain pouring on the track, the 2016 24 Hours of Le Mans started behind the safety car. After the start, Ford traded the lead with Ferrari all day, battling mechanical issues and other cars along the way. At certain points, it looked like Ford wouldn't be grasping at victory that day. But then, with 4.5 hours left, the number 68 GT pulled off a pass on the leading Ferrari down the Mulsanne straight. A few laps later, the Ferrari spun, giving the Ford plenty of breathing room. All they had to do was hold on to the end. Then, as the checkered flag waved, the number 68 crossed the finish line, securing the LM GT Pro Class victory. Ford had won Le Mans. Holy shit. I started crying. It's such a good story. Subscribe to Donut Media so you never have to miss an episode of Up to Speed. This car's got 2 turbos. Want to know how they work? Check out this episode of Science Garage. You want to see a better video than that? Check out this Up to Speed on the Eclipse. If you want a shirt, go to shop.donut.media. Follow me on Instagram at James Pumphrey. Follow Donut on Instagram at Donut Media. I love you.